Hey team, Mike here at After 40 Fitness and after40fitness.ca. Hey, I've been away for a couple of weeks working on another certification. Got me hectic, but I wanted to fit in this video. Had a couple of great questions, so thank you to the viewers who've been not only watching the videos, but then putting comments down below. Obviously, the best comments turn into videos just like this one, and this week is no exception. Look at this one here from a fellow YouTuber, GPP Fitness Over 40. Hey, guys, you should head over there and subscribe to him as well. Show some love. Also working in the same space, the over 40 market. I'm partial to the over 50 now that I'm in that category. But let's give GPP some love. And look at this question. What is the most optimal spacing or frequency of dosing and pulsing protein to achieve the best utilization? Listen, if this is your first time to my channel or you haven't yet, please do subscribe. I live right here with you in the keto, Atkins, low carb, and intermittent fasting space. Punch the like button, subscribe to the video, share the video, whatever suits you. Do something with the video. But on that note, let's get after this. Is there an optimal, as GPP puts it, optimal spacing or frequency of protein in a day? Are you ready? I got some good science for it. I'm going to overload you in a hurry. I kid you not, I got about 10 studies coming your way. But by way of a refresher or context, let's set the stage first and talk about quantity of protein. Because the first thing we should establish, you need to know how much protein your target is for the day, your target or your goal. And remember, protein is the only macro that is called a target or a goal. Okay, carbs are a limit. You don't want to exceed your limit. Fats we call a lever. You'll control fats. You'll decide your level of fat intake, whether it's based on satiety, whether it's based on filling in the gap so your caloric deficit isn't too big. We create our caloric deficit. If you do decide to create your caloric deficit via food, then you know from any of my videos, never protein. We never create our caloric deficit from protein. If anybody ever tells you to cut your protein to create your caloric deficit, punch them in the face and run. All right, do those two things. You want to run don't punch them in the face. But long story short, that's stupid. Okay, the last thing you want to do is create you've already cut carbs to create a caloric deficit, right? We're in the low carb space. You've already slashed 200, 300, 400 grams of carbs a day. You definitely don't want to do it from the substrate that is responsible for not just the building blocks of muscle and bone, but at the same time that runs just about every enzymatic process in the body is based on amino acids. Okay, don't do that, right? If we're going to create a caloric deficit, we do it after we've already slashed carbs with fats, but you still don't want too severe. If you haven't seen my King Calories Get Too Low video, I'll link it below, but you definitely don't want to slash too much. You've already slashed again carbs. Careful slashing fats, but if you're going to, make sure it's fats and not proteins. So to GPP's question, is there an optimal spacing or frequency? We'll look at how to space it out over the day and what the latest research, the prevailing science is on whether it matters if you eat all your protein in one meal versus, let's say, spaced out over the typical 3 or out beyond 3 as far as 6. Are you ready? Let's get after it. Let's get the ball rolling by starting with the myth that you can't absorb more than 25 or 30 grams of protein in a sitting. It is a myth, make no mistake, and it comes from the misuse, if you will, of the word absorb. In fact, one of my buddies, Jeff Nippard, had a really good little explanation of the myth. Let's listen to what he has to say, how he describes it.
So first, where did this myth come from? Well, the true myth is that only 20 to 30 grams of protein can be absorbed. And the word absorb is the key player here, or the key error. Because in reality, we have virtually an unlimited capacity to absorb amino acids.
A good paper, I'll show you this one here real quick. A 2009 paper on digestion and absorption said that virtually all ingested protein is absorbed by healthy humans, right, from 2000. So as far back as 12 years ago, they understood that we get all amino acids that go through our digestion, they get absorbed through the intestinal wall and then therefore into blood flow. So let's just rule that out first. We're not talking about how much protein you eat, which is why people who do OMAD or 2 meals a day or 18-6 can get all their protein in a smaller window, right? Imagine if someone's OMAD and they're trying to eat 75 grams of protein in a meal. Based on this research, and I'm going to show you next, that may not be optimal for muscle protein synthesis, for building muscle, but at least they can get all that protein in. And as long as it takes a few hours to digest and assimilate, get into our bloodstream and be used, that can drag out for a period of time, right? At least 4 or 6 hours, which is what we'll see. All right, so everything I looked up on this topic, it really gave me an answer of it depends. How much protein and how often, it depends. It may be, if you're interested in this topic, just like GPP was, hence the question, it really comes down to what your goals are. I gotta tell you something, that's by far the biggest differentiator on how much protein you ingest and how often is your goals. In fact, Jeff Nippard made a comment on that as well, so I'll just throw it back to him and we'll see what he said about goals.
If you're someone who's trying to get every morsel of muscle that you possibly can, it may be more optimal for you to space out your protein across, say, 4 or 5 meals with maybe 30 to 40 grams of protein in each meal. But if you're someone who is just looking to, improve your general shape and size, then I think that you should focus more so on hitting your total daily protein intake, and whatever protein scheduling it is that allows you to hit that best is what you should go.
And that seems reasonable, right? If your goal is to, it's called a body recomposition. Most people in the Facebook forums are in for body recomp. They want to lose a lot of fat as much as physically possible. And if they can keep their existing muscle and perhaps even gain a few ounces, God bless. But they really don't want to lose muscle. No one does, right? No one goes into a caloric restriction or a diet regimen with the goal of losing muscle. Nobody. That'd be ridiculous. We'd all call that illogical. But losing some fat while maintaining their muscle is a goal. And for them, obviously hitting their daily macro is all that matters of protein. But what if your goal is to add a pound a year? Hey, wouldn't that be cool? I'd love to, at 51 right now, still be adding a pound a year of muscle. I work hard to make that happen. Maybe you do the same. So let's talk about that. If your goal is to add a bit of muscle, let's start then with a bit of a recap on a couple of previous videos on how much per serving. And then we'll talk about how many servings. So looking at this first study, to compare protein amounts, we'll look at 20 grams of egg protein versus 40 grams of protein following a leg workout. In this study, they found there was no significant difference between the two groups. That's right, 20 and 40, no significant difference. This suggests you get all the muscle building benefits and the anabolic bang for your buck, if you will, from just 20 grams of protein. Similar results were found in this second study, where 30 grams of beef protein were shown to be just as effective as 90. Imagine that, 30, the same when it came to muscle protein synthesis, as 90 grams at stimulating muscle protein synthesis, or that muscle synthetic effect. And still another study showed that consuming beyond 20 grams of protein, or more than 20 grams of protein, didn't improve muscle protein synthesis. It did increase oxidation, which means more amino acids are being burned as a fuel source. And then it also increased urea production, meaning that there is an upper limit on usable protein, with more than that usable amount being either A, turned into fuel, or B, just being eliminated as waste, right? Being turned into nitrogenous waste and being excreted. So there is some variability. Everything I looked up on this said there's some variability on the amount. Yes, there is. And while it seems to make sense for a couple of reasons, let me tell you what I mean by that. Obviously, the older the person, the less their ability to absorb nutrients. So an older person, my age in the 50s, if not in the 60s and beyond, would want to increase their protein. You can look this up. There's a term called anabolic resistance. Just like there's insulin resistance, it turns out there's an anabolic resistance as we age, starting at about 30. If you can imagine that. And as of about 30, we begin to, according to studies, we begin to absorb less of the amino acids in protein and get less of a muscle protein synthesis response from those same amount of amino acids. And you know what the solution is to that? You got to eat more, not less. Don't let me tell you that I'm aging, so I need less protein. On the contrary, if you've ever heard of this term called sarcopenia, sarcopenia means, and I'll throw a little definition up, it is age-related. Do nothing more than age-related loss of strength and loss of muscle. Well, you can't have that. Dr. Lyon, one of her favorite phrases that I love is that she calls muscle the organ of longevity. Well, if you're like me and you want to live a long time and be healthy as you live a long time, then it behooves us to not just keep our muscle, but potentially grow some. And as we age, that requires more protein. However, if you, on top of that, and again, you want to avoid sarcopenia at all costs, right? And the way to do that is more protein and resistance training. But the other big factor is if you have more muscle. So really interesting then, it seems logical that if you have more muscle mass, therefore more muscle fibers, therefore more opportunity for muscle protein synthesis, you need to increase your protein to the upper limit of whatever is suggested. So if we're talking about 20, 25, 30 grams, then the more muscular you are, you'd want to be closer to the 30. Here's a great study, by the way. A review done by Phillips and team looked at individual variability on this topic and suggested, look at this, 0.4 grams per kilogram per meal. Right? Call that roughly 0.2 grams per pound of body weight per meal. And this they considered a reasonable amount that you should aim for in every meal. No matter how many meals, you would want to have 0.4 grams per kilogram or 0.2 grams per pound. So a 120-pound person could be right around 22 grams of protein per meal. And for a 200-pound person, the same math worked out to 36. Hey, so for bigger people and especially muscular men, you can see how 25 might not be enough. You want to be in the 30 grams, even 35 grams. And I'm there. I'm 190 pounds. So to me, I'm thinking I need to be at 30 grams per session, per meal. Right? Never mind how many sessions or how many meals per day. Each one to maximize muscle protein synthesis, in my opinion, at my weight of 190 pounds, needs to be right around 30 grams based on this research. Okay? And that is to maximize the muscle synthetic effect at every possible opportunity. If you want to get protein in that's less than that, God bless you. Go ahead and do that. Just understand you're not maximize your opportunity to A, if you're not resistance training, to maintain the muscle you've got, to reduce to as close to zero as possible your muscle protein breakdown. But at the same time, if you do want to add a couple of ounces this year, maybe a pound like I do, then you definitely want to maximize every opportunity for muscle protein synthesis. So let's now get into how many meals per day. This was a fun topic. I got to tell you something. I was able to find articles and studies that went back, white papers that went back to the 70s, the 80s, the era of bodybuilding, the days of Arnold, where 6 and 7, as many as 8 meals a day were considered the best way to build muscle. Now, granted, science has come a long way since then. We now understand that while that can be done, it's by no means mandatory. And yet, I was still able to find studies, and I'm going to show you 3 of them right now, that either endorsed something in the area of beyond 3 meals a day, that the best chances of maximizing muscle protein synthesis was in the 4 to 6 range, but 4 seemed to be the cat's meow. Let me prove it to you. Look at this one here from the Nutrition Bulletin in Wiley. You notice that this one's called a protein intake. It's a review. I should start with this. This one isn't a study. This one is a paper that looked at 7 collective years of research. It's really good. Protein intake for athletes and active adults, current concepts and controversies. Introduction. This American College of Sports Medicine, I mean, this is the place in the U.S. This is where everyone turns to for decision papers and opinions, recommendations on all things athletically inclined. And you'll notice it says it represents an update in the last 7 years of performance nutrition research and practice. Isn't that cool? This period of intensive research on protein intake and nutrient periodization means that current best practice goes beyond daily quantity of protein. It includes protein source, dose per meal, distribution throughout the day, timing around exercise, etc., etc. We're obviously looking right now at, we dealt with dose per meal, and this one endorsed, you'll see in just a second, the same kind of methodology of around 25 to 30 grams per meal, and then distribution throughout the day. Let's see what they had to say on that topic. Recommended dose. So they also confirm what Phillips just said in our previous study about 0.4 grams per kilo, roughly 0.2 grams per pound per meal. And since their recommendation is a target for those who are active, not just, hey, by the way, you're going to see this right down here, down below, the very last line was a typical approach for athletes and active adults. All right, so never mind thinking that 0.2 grams per pound per meal or 0.4 grams per kilo, or the next line targets in the range of 1.2 to 2 grams per kilo per day, right? Somewhere in the area of about 0.6 to 1 gram per pound over the course of a day for you Americans, right? In order to make that happen, that implied somewhere between 4 and 6 eating occasions. Well, think about that for a second. If your goal, like mine, is 120 grams of protein per day, based on this, based on 2 grams per kilo, okay, not quite. I aim for 1.6, which works out to 120 grams for me. And I know that I should have 30 grams per meal to maximize each meal's impact on the anabolic window and the anabolic impact of that protein. Then I need to have 4 meals a day. That's simple math. 120 divided by 30 is 4. I need to have 4. So implies that 4 to 6 eating occasions are separated by 2 to 4 hours is the typical approach. So if your goal, like mine at GPP, I think it must be yours because you're talking about pulsing protein and dosing protein, then we want to add a couple of pounds at our age, of muscle, which behooves now somewhere around, I'm going to call it 4. I don't think 6 to me, and this is just my humble opinion, this does endorse 4 to 6. I think 4 is the right number, spaced out around 3 hours apart. There's a 12-hour eating window. 12. I can still do a little bit of intermittent fasting and call it 12 hours without food, but in my 12 hours of eating, I'm going to get 4 boluses of protein in. Oh, so good. Study number 2 was reported on the American Journal of Physiology and Endocrinology and Metabolism in 2005. The title was Exogenous Amino Acids Stimulate Human muscle anabolism without interfering with the response to mixed meal. This is a long-winded way of saying we're going to look and see if adding in amino acids as a meal in between meals had a greater effect on muscle protein anabolism versus just, let me just show it to you. Why am I trying to tell you? So what they thought they'd do was they had a control group that had 3 meals a day. And then what they did was this group of people, they gave them amino acids in between. So they took them from 3 meals to 6 meals, where the other 3 were pure protein. Pure protein. So look at this, 15 grams of amino acids altered the metabolic response to a nutritionally mixed meal in healthy, recreationally active males. So again, recreationally active guys. We're not talking about monsters. We're not talking about guys in the gym who weigh 250 of solid muscle. We're talking about you and I, active, in this case male, but recreationally active. So they go to the gym 3 times a week. So the control group, you'll see here, had a liquid mixed meal. It was protein with some amino acids, carbs, and fat, as you would imagine, every 5 hours. And also, the very last couple of words, every 5 hours, 3 of them over the course of a day. Right, your typical 3-meal day. And then what they did with the second group, the experimental group, consumed that same meals, those same mixes, but then were given AAs, or this blend, as you can see, at 11 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 9 o'clock as well. Okay, so let's call it, they went from 3 right to 6 meals. They want to see what the impact was. The ingestion of the combination of amino acid supplements and the meals resulted in greater mixed muscle, right at the top there says fractional synthetic rate, FSR, than ingestion of meals alone. So if you're looking for the best possible anabolism effect, the best bang for your buck when it comes to the muscle protein synthesis, it wasn't the 3 meals. They didn't max it out, despite the fact they all had protein. It was this addition of 3 meals of pure protein fit on top. Isn't that cool? Notice then that the net balance, right? They're talking about nitrogenous balance, whether you're in a nitrogen positive or nitrogen negative. The nitrogen balance after the ingestion of these amino acids was significantly greater than after just the meals. And that shows the values. These data indicate that amino acid supplementation produces a greater anabolic effect than ingestion of intact protein, but does not interfere with the normal metabolic response to a meal. So there was no downside. That's, I guess, what their point on this does not interfere with. There was no downside to what happened with the 3 meals, but they got greater metabolic effect from adding in 3 more. Right? So is it mandatory? Is it necessary? No, but it does appear to maximize, to go beyond 3 meals to 4, 5, and 6, does appear to have a positive anabolic effect if that is your goal. Again, just to put that caveat in, if that is your goal. I'm going to throw this in really quick because Dr. Norton is one of my favorite scientists of all time. If you get a chance to look up in YouTube, he's got a channel as well, Dr. Lane Norton. He also, I'll just throw this in for fun, optimal protein intake to maximize muscle protein synthesis, examinations of optimal meal protein intake and frequency for athletes, again, active people. And I want you to notice this was the takeaway, this was the excerpt, was that the muscle protein synthesis response to a mixed meal, right, protein, carbs, and fat, is only 3 hours, despite producing elevations in amino acids for 5. So previous science, said that, well, if amino acids stay elevated for 5 hours, then you shouldn't have to eat protein more often than every 5 hours, right? Would make logical sense. His research, his study found that the muscle protein synthesis effect lasted 3 hours, even though amino acids in the blood may have been up for 5. So he refers to this as a refractory period. If you know what that word means, it means that there's a period after which, even though the amino acids were elevated, muscle protein synthesis could only last for 3 hours before it needed another bolus of leucine. Leucine is the one he referred to here. Okay, last study. This is the big one. I saved it to the last, so if you stuck around this far, I hope you enjoyed it. Timing and distribution of protein ingestion during prolonged recovery from existence exercise alters myofibrillary proteins, again, MPS. And this was reported on in the journal Physiology back in 2013. And the takeaway from this one, you'll notice 24 healthy trained males were assigned to 3 groups and undertook about a resistance exercise followed by 80 grams of whey in the next 12 hours. Now, this is the best part. They all got 80 grams of whey, but they wanted to see in the next 12 hours if it mattered how it was distributed. Okay? Let's have a look. So again, there was an opportunity here to break the 80 grams into 8 10-gram servings, and that worked out to every 90 minutes, what they called the pulse group. So every hour and a half, they got 10 grams. Now, back in the old days, they would have thought, isn't that awesome? These people are going to get 10 grams of protein every 90 minutes for 12 hours. That's got to be the winner, right? That's a constant, steady state of amino acids. Cool. The next group, 4 times 20. So I took the 80 grams away, broke it up into quarters, into 4 batches of 20 grams, and spaced it out every 3 hours. Well, so far, Lane Norton would love this because that exactly suits the refractory period of muscle protein synthesis being no longer than 3 hours, then all of a sudden they're putting in 20 more grams of whey. Bob's your uncle. Let's repeat the next 3 hours. You already know that's going to be the winner, right? I just gave it away. Or every 6 hours, 40 grams. So they just took the 80 and cut it in half and gave them one at 6 hours, the next one at 12 hours to see what would happen. Now, which one do you think should have the best? If you didn't know this information yet that I've gone through, which do you think would have the best? I honestly would have thought that 10 grams every 90 minutes until doing this research. Okay. However, all ingestion protocols increased muscle protein synthesis, you would assume, above the control group that had nothing over 12 hours, continued to fast. But intermittent being that group that had it every 3 hours, 20 grams. As we know, 20 grams is right around the right number, 25. All right. Every 3 hours, intermittent elicited greater muscle protein synthesis than pulse and bolus. So greater than the 90 minutes and greater than the bolus every 6 hours. And you notice the amount, 31% better than pulse and 48% better than bolus. 20 grams of whey consumed every 3 hours was superior to either pulse or bolus feeding patterns for stimulating muscle protein synthesis throughout the day. The study provides novel information on the effect of modulating the distribution of protein intake on anabolic responses and skeletal muscle, yada, 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 and attaining peak muscle mass. All right. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got some good information. It does look like if your goal, like mine and like GPP's, is to add a bit of muscle this year, it looks like you do not want to be an intermittent faster. Or do what I do. Okay, I'm going to just kind of give you my thoughts. What this research shows, though, is to maximize muscle protein synthesis, you actually want somewhere in the area of no less than 3 and 4 or 5, by the look of it, boluses of protein of no less than 20, but preferably, if you understand the math that I went through, depending on your weight, somewhere in the 25 to 30 gram range seems to be ideal. Remember the steak study? 30 grams had the same effect as 90. So it just kind of behooves you and I think, to be in the upper end, not so much so that we encourage waste and or the using of amino acids as energy, but definitely to maximize means let's be at the upper end. Let's go for the 25 to 30 4 times a day. Okay, so I hope that helped. I hope GPP, thank you so much for the question. Again, great questions like this turn into videos just like this one. So if you do have a good comment or question, concern, put it down below. But on that note, hey, thanks for your time. I hope you got some good takeaways. Focus on protein is the takeaway. Even on your fasting days, make sure that your meals are high protein. Aim for your total daily macro protein. Never miss it. It never hurts you to go 10 or 15 or 20% more. It will hurt you to go 10 or 15 or 20% less in your protein. Don't do that. Don't volunteer muscle for no reason. Okay, Sarcopenia is going to try to steal it anyway. Don't give it away for free. On that note, appreciate your time. Don't forget, punch the like button, like the video, subscribe the video, share the video. Do what you can to get it out there. And if someone brings up the topic of how much protein and how often, now you got a video to share. On that note, thanks so much for your time. I'll see you in the next one.